Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn, and the third episode of Event Comics Month 4, Secret Metal Armageddon 2. Hey, you know what movie was hyped up and pretty popular in 2016? Captain America Civil War, aka Avengers 2.5. Maybe there should be an event comic to get in on that action. Now, before anyone says it's possible that's just a coincidence, no, they've admitted it. Then Marvel Editor-in-Chief Axel Alonso stated that they only had about 3 to 4 months to plan Civil War 2 in order to try to capitalize on the film. And you know what? Good on them for trying. I've said before that Marvel and DC absolutely suck at trying to get new comic readers by capitalizing on the movies, and they should make more attempts. Mind you, once again, this kind of illustrates how bad they are at that, because instead of focusing on individual popular heroes, they're trying to get them to read an event comic, which features a lot of characters that weren't in the MCU at the time. Captain America Civil War works because it's smaller scale. The Sokovia Accords were about keeping the Avengers from going out of control instead of forcing every person with superpowers to register with the government, and most importantly, the character drama felt very much consistent with how they had been portrayed up to that point. Tony Stark trying way too hard to fix everything and pushing his friends away. Cap standing for liberty and the people he loves first, and what's more, it's a villain that drives them apart. It's entirely possible that things would have settled a lot more peacefully if Zemo hadn't been involved. Not perfect because Steve Rogers didn't want to sign the Accords, but still better than how things did end up playing out. And even then, during the big fight between both sides, there was so much mutual respect and friendship between most of them. They didn't want this, but there was a point where it couldn't be helped, especially as Cap's side thought there was a ticking clock before an even worse situation arose. Versus the original Civil War comic, where everyone is an out-of-character asshole, people lie and betray each other, do very morally questionable things, all in the service of an unjust law, and the writer thought we should be on the side of the people doing the horribly unethical things. But hey, doing another Civil War wasn't necessarily a bad idea. While we joke about Marvel events continually going to the well of heroes fighting heroes again and again, they did plenty of events over the years that weren't about that. Secret Wars 2015, Chaos War, Siege, Shadowland, Infinity. Having a good conflict between heroes could work. Need I remind everyone, my favorite comic of all time is a heroes fighting heroes story, JLA/Titans The Technis Imperative. There are ways of doing it successfully. And hey, they have the benefit of hindsight now about how badly the first Civil War was received. And they can pick a subject of dissent among heroes that, while a heavy one, isn't going to be as hopeless like it was in Civil War. See, the thing about Civil War is that it didn't matter if Cap's side routinely beat the pro-registration side in fights or whatever. Captain America's side is not going to overthrow the government to end the Registration Act. Tony Stark wasn't the one behind it. The government was. And as we all know,
I'm the government, I'm the government, I'm the reason nothing works.
Unless you reveal that a supervillain was directing it, or we see lobbying or public pressure to get the act repealed again during the story, which we did not. They didn't even try to backpedal and claim the Skrulls were behind it during Secret Invasion or anything. The fight was pretty much over already before it even started. So hey, Civil War 2 can have a premise that doesn't have the weight of politics hanging over it. A tried and true sci-fi concept that could divide people. Hell, have it be a villain plot all along this time that forces everyone to work together to stop them in the end. Hey, guess what? That didn't happen. In fact, it's arguable whether Civil War 2 is worse than the first one. I lean towards better, but that's not a huge hill to climb. It's still really bad. So let's dig into Civil War 2 and we'll talk about why that is.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. couch, Linkara. He has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch, Linkara. Ghosts got a universe in flux, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara.
Like last time, not going to go really in-depth about individual covers due to time. It does follow a similar pattern to the original Civil War event, where a good chunk of the cover is empty space with just the title, but it feels like they've increased the ratio of actual artwork versus the empty space, so instead of it being like half and half, it's more like 1/3 is title, 2/3 actual cover. So if this trend continues, the covers should be good around Civil Wars 4 and 5, I guess. And while none of these covers are really that compelling or interesting, at least they depict stuff that's relevant to the issue, there is a number 0 in addition to the rest of the event, but there's not much to it and can be skipped. We will talk about 2 brief things of import. The first is a matter of character development. Carol Danvers, now as Captain Marvel, talks briefly to frequent Hulk therapist and recurring character Doc Samson. She's not doing so in an official capacity, but just as a friend. After the 2015 Secret Wars event, the Ultimate Universe and the 616 Marvel Universe kinda sorta merged? It's complicated, but the point is that Miles Morales is now a part of the main Marvel continuity. And pretty much no one else, because I guess they figured the main Marvel universe didn't really need so much cannibalism in it. However, rather than waste a perfectly good team name, they kept the Ultimates, the equivalent of the Avengers, and instead made them their own superhero team led by Captain Marvel. And their mission is to be a proactive force that stops disasters before they happen. Oh boy, a fresh and original concept that totally works and has not been frequently critiqued and shown how idiotic it is, since 99% of the time they're doing what any other superhero team does anyway! However, Carol's description of it here is pretty neat, and it's kind of the basis of the entire event, which we'll get into in a bit. Anyway, Carol's description likens it to how one of her cousins has kids, and those kids being kids require constant supervision, or they'll do something like, say, pick up a pair of scissors and pretend they're a sword to play with, not realizing how dangerous that is. And thus their lives as superheroes keep having so many near disasters that they just want to prevent some before they occur. Sounds noble. Sounds like we're fighting the weather. Suit up, Ultimates! There's a light drizzle coming! She just wishes that there was some way they could have an all-purpose thing that could protect them from horrible things coming, rather than hoping there'll be enough to stop it. And what a coinky-dink! That brings us over to the other half of the relevant info for this story. I haven't talked much in this show about the Inhumans, but they rose to a lot of prominence in the last several years, especially as Marvel began pushing them more due to Disney not having the rights to the X-Men and mutants in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While it didn't really go anywhere in the MCU, in the comics, the Inhumans are kind of an offshoot of humanity that lives on the moon with special powers and abilities. During a previous event, a cloud of a special compound called the Terrigen Mist was released on Earth, slowly spreading over it. While most people were unaffected by it, people who were descendants of Inhumans suddenly found themselves reborn, given incredible powers and mutations. And according to this comic, puts them in cocoons, because I guess we all descended from butterflies too. Go, Inhuman! Use Harden! And thus one person, Ulysses, who's exposed to it, suddenly gains precognitive powers as the issue ends with a vision of an utterly destroyed New York. And thus we enter issue 1 with Ulysses running through the woods, confused as all hell, until he's found by Medusa, the Inhuman who would give Starfire a run for her money on long hair, and a group of other Inhumans. We're the Inhumans. We can help you. This is a good thing. I don't know about you guys, but I'd be very suspicious of anyone who felt the need to tell me this is a good thing, because it comes across in kind of the same way that I would say it. You know, in that sarcastic way I'd say it following the statement, Civil War II had over 140 tie-ins. This is a good thing. No kidding, when I initially read this, I got digital copies of every comic in the event, much like I did with the others, in case I needed to reference something or get comic panels for the review. As I clicked through from issue 4 of Civil War II to get to issue 5, I just kept hitting tie-ins, making me wonder if I had accidentally skipped it while hitting Shift-L to load the next file. But no, it was simply that I hadn't reached it yet. Because between issues 4 and 5, there were 55 tie-in comics! This is actually worse than Secret Invasion. Assuming an average of $4 per comic, which might go up or down, particularly up for the main miniseries itself, and not accounting for sales tax, that's a minimum $600 that Marvel was charging for people to get the full breadth of the event. And this isn't even the culmination of anything like Secret Invasion was. It's just, hey, we need an event comic, I guess, and we need it to try to tie into a movie that will cost considerably less to see and will be more enjoyable. This is how you get event fatigue, Marvel. Not just the sheer amount of events, but the sheer amount of tie-ins that won't let you just enjoy the books you wanted to read. Anyway, we cut to a few weeks later where pretty much all the heroes of the Marvel Universe have gathered to fight, well, that thing, a celestial destructor. However, they have a plan and very quickly execute it, sending this big, scary Destructo thing back to its own universe and preventing it from returning and killing them all. So, party time after cleanup! At the party in Stark Tower, Tony Stark gives all the kudos to the Inhumans, who were the ones to give them such a heads up on this thing's arrival, and with such specificity that they were able to defeat it with a perfect plan that went without a hitch. However, She-Hulk is curious how exactly they knew this thing was coming, so she, Captain Marvel, and Tony Stark all want to know the deets. As such, Medusa leads some heroes into the supply room to answer that question, including Spider-Man for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's explained in a tie-in why he's at this meeting. Medusa introduces them to Ulysses and his precognitive abilities. You're an Inhuman who can see the future before it happens? How exactly? Okay, so already we have a problem here. Look at how amazed Carol Danvers is and how skeptical She-Hulk is, as if Marvel has never had a character with clairvoyance or precognitive abilities. Not only is that not true, you can look it up, Marvel has had a ton, but one such character with limited precognition is in the room with them! Spider-Man! It has been confirmed time and again that Peter Parker's spider sense, it's precognition. It's why Kane from the Clone Saga had visions of the future. It was an extension of his spider sense. And even if Spidey wasn't with them, this is the Marvel Universe. You guys literally just fought an other-dimensional being utilizing magic and are talking with a race of super people who live on the moon. What exactly is so shocking and unbelievable about precognition? Ulysses says he doesn't know how it happens, he just sees it. Tony Stark suggests bringing Jean Grey in to read his mind and figure out how it works. Steve Rogers is a little worried about it because of tension between the X-Men and Inhumans. Is that a good idea? It came out of my mouth, Steve, so yeah, it's by definition a good idea. The past 20 years of comics would disagree with you on that, Mr. Stark. Or is your dictionary unreadably stained from the blood resulting from all those good ideas? So yeah, they bring in Jean Grey, one of the Inhumans asking if this is really necessary. Let's say yes, respectfully. Remember this point in a minute, I'll circle back to it. Anyway, Jean Grey says she's going to create a mental bridge between Ulysses and the rest of the people in the room to try to show them how his visions work. But you won't show them everything. You won't show every weird thought you have in your head. I don't have any weird thoughts in my head. Everybody does. You should see what She-Hulk is thinking about right now. Hey, not cool. Ha 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 ha! It's funny because she invades people's privacy. Anyway, she just tells him to relax and tell them his story. He explains how he's just a college student, the Terrigen Mist hit them, and instead of the mind bridge, he ends up completely isolated even from Jean Grey. Jean explains that for some reason, his mind can't be read. It's like a closed system. Tony, Carol, and Ulysses all want to know what that means. Ulysses especially because he's just a young guy not really into all this superhero stuff. And then Carol suddenly turns it around and offers him a job working for the Ultimates, trying to avert disasters before they start, much to Tony's incredulity. Well, we have an Inhuman we've never met, whose mind is a closed book, who can somehow tell us a future, and that's good enough for you? And Tony is right here. Carol is jumping the gun. After she herself was confused about what all this meant, they should really learn more about his powers, what's involved with them, etc., before putting him to work on anything heavy. And then Tony starts going off the rails. It was good enough for you yesterday.
Yesterday, I didn't know what this was.
How is this any different than if some magic user had said that they saw this in a vision, or if someone came back in time from the future or something? Because both of those have happened too.
What's on your mind, Tony? Nope, I'm not gonna have a morality debate with you, Steve. Those never end well for us.
I think you mean it doesn't end well for Bill Foster, Tony. He's the one from the original Civil War who died, and at the time of this video's release, has not come back to life. Carol rightfully asks what the hell this has to do with morality.
You have an Inhuman with a power to predict possible future events. We have no idea what his deal is. No offense, kid, I'm sure you're a lovely individual. We have no idea about the probability ratio his power is working with.
Ah yes, the greatest moral quandary that ethical philosophers are still struggling with after centuries. Probability ratios.
It wasn't a possible future, Tone. It was going to happen. Did you see that thing? But it didn't happen because we stopped it. So it wasn't the future he saw. It was a possible future. Think about it.
Yeah, I have. And what I think is that you're an idiot and being needlessly contrary. All that means is that the future can be changed. And good, because otherwise it wouldn't matter what Ulysses told you, because it wouldn't affect the outcome. This isn't a moral decision to use information like that to prevent a disaster that could destroy the world. One should work to prevent bad possible futures from occurring. Tony's being needlessly hostile about this right from the get-go. Remember, he insisted on getting Jean Grey to scan his mind. He did not trust this at all, and is looking for an excuse to justify his distrust. He continues on by wanting to know more about Ulysses and his powers, and there's not much to it. He says that the visions are not just him seeing things, but experiencing them as if he was there. The Inhumans found him and helped him with them, telling him to stay calm and figure out any details he could so as to prevent bad stuff from happening, like the apocalypse from that celestial destructor.
Okay, let's say the guy here comes running up to us and says, "Oh my god, I just saw a vision of the Hulk making out with Ultron, and a baby popped out, and the baby was a reincarnated Hitler."
You are standing in a room with a woman with prehensile hair, a psychic, a guy with bug powers, a woman who gained superpowers from an alien explosion, and you know a talking space raccoon. Stop acting like that couldn't happen, Tony.
But do we stop the Hulk before it happens? Do we lock him away before he does something we don't like?
Well, pardon me for not wanting to be judgmental of someone's relationship preferences, Tony. And in addition, how do you even know that the reincarnated baby is Hitler? Does it have like a Hitler mustache right out of the gate? That could be a reincarnated Charlie Chaplin.
Again, yesterday was yesterday. Easy call. The big cosmic monster doesn't invade. No harm, no foul. But what if the next one isn't so easy? What if the next one is one of us? What if Ulysses tells us you are a danger to our future? Do we stop you before you do your voodoo that you're gonna do? Even though maybe you didn't even know you were going to do it?
Okay, but Tony, that's not unprecedented either. A hero turning into a villain happens all the frickin' time. So yes, you stop them! Now, he probably means kill the hero or lock them up, because that seems to be the conclusion made in this series about it, that it's a zero-sum situation where the only options are kill or imprison. No one brings up hero is possessed by alien ghost, or it's really an imposter who fooled us, and knowing this allows us to stop them before they spring their trap. Or hell, even we talk to them and just through a simple act of kindness prevent whatever horrible thing causes them to turn evil. I guess when all you do day in and day out is hit things, every problem looks like a punching bag. Carol responds to Tony with, depends. Because yeah, every situation is different, and thus they'd have to approach each vision carefully to consider the best response to it. But Tony's just, depends on what? And Carol has no answer. Instead, she brings it around to Tony's personality. I thought you were a futurist. For those who don't know, a futurist is someone who studies and predicts the future based on what they know about the present. Tony Stark has said that that's why he's such a good inventor. It allows him to predict what society or his own tech will need and make things for it. And thus his response here.
That means I respect the future. I believe in the future. I worship at its feet.
That is not what being a futurist is, Tony. And what's funny is that we'll later learn how Ulysses' powers work, and it fits perfectly in with his futurist beliefs. See, that's the thing about this event. It has a massive bad reputation for making Carol Danvers look bad, but less talked about is that it also makes Tony Stark look like an enormous, hypocritical, short-sighted, puritanical moron. How's that for a both sides kind of attitude, huh? The central conflict in this series is bad because both sides take it to ludicrous extremes that make them look like absolute idiots. Tony says that he just thinks that they need to be careful about what Ulysses tells them and what they do about it. And he's absolutely right. They should be careful about it. The problem is that his viewpoint becomes, we must not listen to anything he says and assume that it won't come to pass.
Wow, Tony Stark.
Yeah. It's exciting. Then you get over it. Then you remember that he's still insanely rich, so you still hang out with him so he'll cover the check. A few weeks later, Ulysses has a vision of Thanos attacking Earth and contacts the Ultimates. Now, the battle was shown in a tie-in issue, specifically the Free Comic Book Day one, but it really should have been in the main miniseries. The Ultimates ambush him, and while they do hold him, She-Hulk is severely injured, and War Machine is killed. And James Rhodes stayed dead for 2 years! Wow, even Wasp lasted longer. But that doesn't matter. For right now, Tony is just angry and running a gamut of emotions, particularly when he sees She-Hulk in critical condition. Carol explains that they knew where Thanos was going to be and why he attacked, looking for a cosmic cube that he thought was on Earth. I mean, it could have been on Earth. After all, the cosmic cube can do anything! But yeah, Tony wants to know how they knew that Thanos would be there, and of course Carol says it was because of Ulysses' vision. Now, Tony is pissed right now, and he's not exactly one known for restraint, so I don't blame him for being angry and upset, lashing out at Carol and saying some stupid stuff like, "You killed him as good as if you did it with your own hands." This is also Carol refusing to be vulnerable, because of course we see flashbacks of how this death is affecting her. The two were an item for a while, and so she's putting on a brave face and trying to be detached about it when she really shouldn't be. But hey, people mourning and grieving. The problem is that this event is the catalyst for the rest of Tony's actions, and people have said, well, he's just feeling grief about what happened. And that only gets you so far. Grief and sadness and sorrow do not justify the things he does. It merely explains them. And even then it turns to nonsense, as we see here. I told you this would happen! Told her what, Tony? Because all Ulysses said was, Thanos is going to attack, here's where it's going to happen. It's no different than if they had detected Thanos approaching with a deep space telescope or something. Or would you have really said, well, we can't predict where he's actually heading for. I respect the future too much to assume that. Because, what's the alternative, Tony? Not try to stop Thanos? Maybe if Ulysses' vision had said that War Machine was going to survive if he went into this fight, sure, but he didn't provide a play-by-play. Or at least if he did, it wasn't shown in this comic. And if a tie-in did provide that, well, up yours, Marvel, for forcing me to buy a tie-in to have that essential information. All that we saw was that Thanos was attacking and was caught off guard by heroes being there to meet him, which I get the impression, given the other apocalyptic vision, that they weren't there to meet that threat in the original version of events. Ulysses' vision didn't kill War Machine, Thanos did! And Tony seems to have no anger at Thanos for this. Instead, when Carol admits that they did manage to capture him, he yells out, I'm gonna make sure that none of you play God ever again! Oh boy, I set my TiVo to record my favorite show! Oh, oops, sorry. Never mind. Tony Stark said that doing something under the assumption and knowledge that something is going to happen is playing God. He flies away, She-Hulk regaining consciousness long enough for her to tell Carol that she needs to fight for the future, ending the first issue. So let's talk for a second about the Choose Your Side advertisement, a similar kind of promotion they did for the original Civil War.
The emergence of a new Inhuman, an Inhuman with the power to predict the future, has saved Manhattan from certain calamity, but in the aftermath of this triumph, faced with the realization that they now possess the ability to forecast tomorrow, Earth's greatest champions are forced to make a choice. Protect the future or change the future.
Protect what future? With most of these predictions, they don't have a future. Do they protect the future where the Celestial Destructor kills everyone? The future where Thanos kills a bunch of people? This is the problem with this event. They have to get Carol to go to extremes in the story because otherwise Tony's position at the start is plain and simply stupid. But hey, let's see what Tony does now to ingratiate his viewpoint to the audience. He travels to the Inhuman city on Earth, New Atalan, and kidnaps Ulysses, injuring several of the Inhumans and causing an international incident in the process. But yeah, he ties up Ulysses to a chair in a hidden basement lab. What did I do?
My best friend is dead.
Our hero, everybody.
I'm still not sure what I did. I don't even know who we're talking about. Colonel James Rhodes, an honest-to-God American hero. The mission you sent him on cost him his life.
Me? I didn't send anybody anywhere. And Tony has no response to that. Are you gonna hurt me? Are you gonna kill me?
I'm Iron Man. I'm one of the good guys.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you forever. Fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves, you fucks.
Why do I get the feeling that I'm gonna use the Merlin fish repeatedly in this story? Also, it's from Merlin Reacts to the Fine Bros. Remember that I try to credit all clips used in the end credits. Anywho, the one who is not an honest-to-God American hero hooks up some electrodes to Ulysses, telling him he wants to see how his powers work. Dumb question, but it's been weeks since they first met him. Why haven't they done this already, if only out of scientific curiosity? Ulysses says that he can't control when the visions happen, so Tony does a few things. Pokes him, threatens him with violence, etc., etc., all to get readings down on how his brain reacts. And why? I'm 99% sure I'm about to go to war with some very close friends of mine. Over you. Jumping the gun a little, aren't you? He's had 2 visions, both of which were to stop lots of people from dying and nothing else. It's not like he can reliably give lotto numbers or something. He has a random vision of disaster and warned people about it. That's it! Tony brings up many excellent points here, that these abilities need to be studied because it's entirely possible that his personality, biases, and emotional state could affect it because they don't actually know anything about his powers. But frankly, I don't give a damn about him wanting to find those answers because the guy who's asking them kidnapped an innocent person whose only crime was trying to help! You could have asked me to do these tests. My friend died today because of a mission he shouldn't have even known about. And a lot of other people would have died in the time it took him to fly out to stop Thanos, which is what he would have been doing anyway, because as you said, he was a hero, unlike some people I can name right now. Like, I can't get over this. Tony is just suggesting that Rhodey wouldn't have died because he wouldn't have been in the fight with Thanos. But the instant that Thanos landed and attacked while looking for the Cosmic Cube, he would have frickin' flown out to fight him. Oh sure, maybe he wouldn't have died, but it's entirely possible that he would have because it's frickin' Thanos! Ugh! Whatever, Tony downloads a copy of Ulysses' brain for further study as a team of heroes storms his location. Tony. Carol, just in time for Parcheesi. That line was Parcheesi. True, but I'm in mourning. They're not all gonna be winners. Oh, well, that's okay, Tony. You just enacted a premeditated plan to kidnap someone, torture them. Yes, he does. He admits that he tortured him a little. Make jokes about it, and get into an argument. But it's okay. We can excuse that because you're in mourning. Tony freely admits that he's having a nervous breakdown, rambling about how they all fight to protect the future, and it's all about personal responsibility. But thankfully, Ulysses interrupts that by having another vision. Not so thankfully, that vision is transmitted to everyone in the room, meaning that this interruption stops Tony Stark from facing any consequences whatsoever for his actions. The vision is of the Hulk murdering a ton of heroes, and the entirety of the group saw that and are understandably shaken. Issue 2 ends with Captain Marvel showing up rather angrily to a lab outside of Utah where Bruce Banner is working. I'm going to take a moment here to apologize to some of my viewers. See, one of the downsides of not covering the tie-ins is that I can't really address one of the big critiques of event comics: how they so frequently screw over the regular titles. And I don't just mean interrupt the story that was already going on in order to try to convince you to buy something you may have zero interest in. I also refer to how events interfere with the actual story that the creators are trying to tell in their own books, separate from the rest of the universe. And in this case, I was informed by fans that the plot points that follow here contradict and screw with what was actually going on in the Hulk comic at the time. I was not a reader of those books, so I can't speak to that. And I can't speak to the overall tie-ins that people say actually did expand on and properly give character motivations for Tony and Carol, because there are over 140 of them, and these episodes are coming out later than they should be as it is.
And even in 2016, I didn't care about this event. I was reading all of 3 Marvel books: Deadpool, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, and Miss Marvel. Deadpool barely tied in, Squirrel Girl didn't tie in at all, and Miss Marvel certainly had a part in this, but it wasn't really the story I wanted to read with her in it. So all I have to go on here is the main miniseries. But I gotta tell ya, even though I can't talk about how stupid the continuity issues are with other books, I can tell you how stupid things are in the event miniseries itself! Issue 3 switches things up so that the events that follow instead are told in flashbacks at a trial. We'll get into what the trial actually is soon enough, but let's get down into the asinine, downright baffling choices that follow from our supposed heroes. As we saw, Carol Danvers shows up and doesn't attempt to be friendly or courteous to Bruce, instead demanding to know what he's working on and if it's Gamma related. Tony Stark also is there and demanding to know the same thing, clearly putting Bruce off and making him nervous. They do nothing to explain themselves, as he says he hasn't had a Hulk incident in almost a year, and they tell him to step outside his secret lab.
No matter what happens, stay calm. I believe in you.
So, what have they done to ensure that Bruce stays calm? Aside from confronting him out of the blue, not even saying hello and asking how he's doing because it's clear it's been a while since they talked to him? Why, they brought an entire army of superheroes right outside his front doorstep. Quinjets, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. Naturally, he is utterly shocked and horrified by this, wondering what it was that he did. What a brilliant plan, guys! We have a future vision of the Hulk murdering tons and tons of superheroes, so what do? Bring tons and tons of superheroes right to him!
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Hey, here's a dumb idea. Why didn't just one of you go to talk to him? Explain calmly that someone has had a vision of the future where the Hulk kills all of you, something that he has never done, even when he brought an army to conquer New York for being pissed at the death of his wife and thousands of innocents, and that you want to make sure that this vision doesn't come to pass. So, could we figure out why the vision could have happened? Maybe it's related to what you're currently working on. We're not blaming you, we're not even assuming that it will happen, but we need to cover our bases just in case. And first and foremost, we don't want to cause undue stress, so we'll do it here in the comfort of your own home and lab, just you and me, and we'll set up some additional precautions because we trust you and care about you. But no, wait! Instead, let's be as stressful and accusatory and frightening and terrible as we can be without actually just attacking you without provocation! Never has this clip been more accurate than when I read this scene!
Your incompetence is staggering.
Even accounting for the sliding timescale in comics, it still has to have been like a decade or two for you people! How are you still so bad at knowing how to handle the Hulk after all this time? And of course, instead of making this about helping their friend, because obviously he doesn't want to become Murder Hulk any more than they do, they're making this about the stupid frickin' Vision stuff! That they're using this case to settle their disagreement! Tony and I clearly disagree about using this kid's visions to fight for a safer future.
I say, well, you know what I say. You say the future has to happen or it isn't the future.
Oh my God, Tony! You have traveled through time! Most of the people you are with have traveled through time! They have gone to the future! They have altered the timeline to prevent a terrible future or a terrible present! This story requires the characters to all have collective amnesia, as if they have never encountered this kind of phenomena before involving the future and changing it, when even just 3 years earlier, Brian Michael Bendis, who also wrote this, did the Age of Ultron event. And while that event was also hot garbage, time travel was a major part of it! Sure, Tony himself didn't time travel, but they were aware that alterations were made to the timeline! It's what led into other event books and whatnot! Yeah, I may not be able to talk about individual character inconsistencies related to tie-in books and whatnot, but I can definitely tell you that the entire premise for this event is contradicted by the larger scope of stories in the Marvel Universe! Both Carol and Tony agreed that they needed more proof of Banner hulking out in the future, so they have come here not to try to help, But to hack his systems without his permission, steal his work, announce that they're doing this, and say, yep, you are experimenting on yourself and we're placing you under arrest. Shock of all shocks, this gets him pissed off. However, before he can Hulk out, the other shoe drops. An arrow flies out of the trees and hits Banner right in the head, killing him. It was Hawkeye who surrenders himself to the others. That's what the trial is. Clint Barton's murder of Bruce Banner. He explains at the trial that Bruce had come to him months before with a special arrow that would, once and for all, kill him. It was to be a last resort if he ever transformed into the Hulk again, since his experiments on himself were working, but he'd see another transformation as his final failure. And indeed, there's a recording in the hacked files from Banner that he asked Clint to do this. Tony thinks he wasn't going to Hulk out, but Clint says that his vision is just more acute, and he saw a flash of green in his eyes, half a mile away, that it was about to happen and the vision was going to come true. A situation that, I'm gonna keep hammering home here, could have been avoided entirely if they hadn't done everything possible to stress him out! I sympathize! And there's been a bit of a time skip, since Carol Danvers is also asked about Ulysses and his power, which they've been using to stop disasters since Banner's death. Even immediately after Bruce's death, Tony was making it about the visions, and Carol was not in any way helping. We're supposed to be guarding! We're supposed to be protecting, defending, avenging! What was this? Accountability! No, it was garbage! That's what it was! Oh, and in case you were wondering, 2 years for Bruce Banner as well. Led to the critically acclaimed Immortal Hulk book that Moarte spotlighted last year, returning the Hulk to his more horror-themed roots. But let's not dwell on books much better than this crap. The verdict comes down, not guilty for Hawkeye, with the majority of Americans even supporting it. Not surprising given the Hulk's history, but more importantly, issue 3 of the event ends with Tony having finished mapping out Ulysses' brain, and thus knowing how his powers work. Tony goes to talk to someone about what he's found out. If we've learned anything in our time in uniform, or as Avengers, it is that the future, it's not written. It can't be written. And that was my original problem with this new Inhuman. This future-reading, fortune-telling vision maker. You can't see a future that hasn't happened yet. So you just acknowledged that the future can be changed based on your time as an Avenger, but you refuse to acknowledge that he can perceive a future and thus give you information on how to change it?
You're kind of an idiot, aren't you?
Like, that's the only way I can interpret that sentiment. Because otherwise it sounds like he means he traveled into the future and it was just a black void because it hadn't happened yet. And if that's what he meant, then I really have to ask you, Tony, do you believe in Langoliers too?
Time is a construct. Time is a concept. Time might be an organism that lives and breathes around us.
Time is little tweeting bird chirping in meadow. Time is a wreath of pretty flowers that smell bad. God, I wish I was watching Star Trek right now instead. Ooh, even better reference here. Time is an illusion. Lunchtime doubly so. I guess in the in-between time, the Inhumans decided to paint Ulysses' face and dress him in some goofy robes. I don't know, maybe a tie-in explained all that. And before you try to tell me which one it happened in, given the rest of this review so far, do you really think that I care to read anything more to do with this event? Tony rightfully points out that these visions, since he experiences them, probably are affecting his mental state, and in turn, affecting the visions, because he thinks that Ulysses' powers aren't really seeing the future. He explains about after scanning Ulysses' mind, he has solved how it works. He's somehow able to subconsciously absorb information and energy, probably mental energy and thought patterns too, with the way Tony describes it, and puts it back out in the form of visions for a theoretical vision of the future. He's not seeing the future, he's creating an algorithm of a possible future, which is probably the most out-of-character thing for Tony Stark. He's the billionaire CEO of a tech company. He should love algorithms. On a slightly less jokey note, Tony should be in frickin' love with this kid because that's what a futurist is supposed to be doing on a smaller scale. I don't think Bendis actually gets what Tony's deal is with futurism. But yeah, put simply, yes, his visions are just guesswork. A very possible future, but it's only just guesswork. Tony's concern is that this is going to lead to more mistakes in the visions, and in turn with Carol Danvers' actions. Profiling people. In case you didn't know, criminal profiling is not great and frequently inaccurate. I'm not even talking about racial profiling either, which is a whole other can of worms, but certainly related to it. It's an attempt by law enforcement to try to pin down possible people who have or who will commit a crime, and it has led to the wrong people being arrested, scorned, harassed, and etc. And thus we see this demonstrated as Carol arrests a woman who was supposed to be a deep cover operative for Hydra carrying a bomb or something in her briefcase, but the briefcase was empty and they have no evidence to actually support Ulysses' vision of her. And thus we bring it around again, because as I said, we needed to have Carol's side look bad too, because otherwise Tony Stark looks like a raving lunatic and moron with his constant grrr, predicting the future that keeps being accurate bad. For those who don't know, a lot of this comes back around to a sci-fi movie, which in turn was loosely based on a Philip K. Dick short story, called Minority Report. The basic concept is that in the future, 3 psychics with the ability to predict crimes before they happen are used by a special police division to stop crimes before they occur. Thus the dilemma is whether or not it's right to arrest people that didn't actually commit a crime, whether free will exists, and things could have gone a different way. Now, the problem with the Minority Report dilemma in sci-fi is that it ignores something that exists in actual law. The argument against such predictions is, well, they haven't actually done anything yet, and free will says they may have chosen not to. And that's true, but in the real world, if you plan to commit a murder, plan to commit fraud, yeah, those are still crimes. It's called conspiracy to commit. Sure, it's not as bad as when they actually did the deed, but let's not pretend the law doesn't already punish people for something that they didn't yet do. Intending to do wrong is still bad.
Attempted murder. Now, honestly, what is that? Do they give a Nobel Prize for attempted chemistry, do they?
Now, I'm not saying Captain Marvel is right. Far from it. She is still ethically in the wrong to do the profiling stuff, and her solution is, once again, zero-sum. Only arrest people instead of trying to do anything else. We saw that with Bruce Banner. They show up at his house ready to take him into custody instead of trying to do anything else. Same goes for the prediction with this woman whom they arrest. Sure, if there wasn't time to gather evidence beforehand, I could see them taking immediate action, but instead it's just the same blunt instrument we see her utilize over and over in this story. Just arrest people before they've done anything wrong without even the possibility of another approach to the problem. It might not be premeditated at all, and they're arresting someone for something they wouldn't have done if they had been given a heads up or a talking to. The book assumes that there are only 2 options, when of course every situation is different. But because we need the audience to choose a side, and for there to be a conflict at all, nuance can't exist. And the result is that the story that wants to be smart, that wants to raise interesting philosophical questions, is actually really dumb and unsophisticated. If the only way you can think of to have these characters disagree and fight each other is for them to be idiots, then perhaps the dilemma is not as compelling as you think it is, and you're just wasting everyone's time. But yeah, Tony is telling all this to a group of heroes, including Carol Danvers herself, but primarily to Steve Rogers, saying that if Steve says to drop this, he will, since he learned to always listen to him about this stuff, especially in light of the original Civil War. Tony, are you absolutely 100% sure about all of this? Would I call us all together like this if I wasn't? Well, yeah, but maybe you could have picked someplace better than the dingy, abandoned apartment? Like, where the hell are you guys even supposed to be right now? Do you think I want to be in a room with big hair after what her people did to me in my life? Thanos killed Rhodey! Hawkeye killed Bruce Banner! And you attacked and kidnapped a citizen of a foreign nation, Tony! Big hair didn't do jack to you! If you posted this on the Am I the Asshole Reddit, every response would be YTA! Henry McCoy has been over Tony's data, and it looks to be correct, so the question now becomes what Carol is going to do with the information. Carol's analogy is apt. A person comes up and says, that guy over there has a gun, and he said he's about to open fire. Do you check it out, or do you say to yourself, well, I'll wait until he opens fire to see if the first guy was right? Tony tries to counter, well, how high a percentage of chance does it need to be right to act on these visions? What if I told you there was only a 10% chance the vision was right? Then you still take precautions, Tony, because a low chance is still a non-zero chance. I got a little bit of flack in the Batman v Superman review for making fun of Bruce Wayne's, if there's a 1% chance of him being evil, we have to assume it's an absolute certainty. The logic was that the effects were so devastating from even such a low chance that you have to do something about it. But again, the problem is a matter of perspective and nuance. If there's a 1% chance of something terrible happening, you take precautions against it. You don't assume it is absolutely going to happen. Bruce should make sure that if Superman is evil, he has the tools to take him down if necessary. You don't just jump to, we absolutely positively must assume he is evil and go and kill him. It's the same as in this story. They're assuming there are only two options. Completely ignore it or go as hard as possible. And Carol is absolutely right here. You're saying, what if there was only a 10% chance Thanos was going to get his hands on a cosmic cube before we stopped him? That's more than enough for me. And you know why she's right? Because the worst case scenario the other way is that Thanos doesn't show up at all and they stand around for an hour doing nothing. She points out that Rhodey would have agreed with her, but Tony just says, well, he's dead, so F you. She flies out through the roof. Some criticized this, but again, this place is a crap hole, probably already scheduled for demolition, so I'm not exactly that upset about it. Although once more, why are they meeting here and not like at the Ultimates home base or something? Tony says he's gonna go public with this, but whether or not that ends up happening, I can't say for certain, because the story decides to drop that point. As said before, Carol took that one woman into custody due to thinking she was a Hydra agent, and she goes even farther by threatening the woman and claiming that they can hold her indefinitely if they so choose. That is in fact a lie based on what Maria Hill says, and furthermore cements her as a jackass. Yeah, interrogation techniques, but even now, Tony's research indicates that there is still a chance to be wrong. And hell, T'Challa will later admit that, yes, Ulysses has gotten a few predictions wrong, so it's time to pull back a bit on the extent of these operations. But no, we need there to be a fight. It's why it's called Civil War, of course, and thus Nightcrawler teleports in and takes the woman outside. Realizing that Tony must have put them up to this, Carol decides to arrest him. When all you've got is a hammer, oh, wait, Thor is the one with that, and she's on Tony's side, as we see when Tony and his forces arrive on the roof of the building to confront Carol, who in turn summons up the Ultimates and even the friggin' Guardians of the Galaxy to end issue 4. Because, you know, we need them to have a tie-in, even though logically they should have nothing to do with this, since they're Marvel cosmic characters. Also, people kept telling me that it was only the Mac Gargan Venom who has eye holes in his outfit, but here's Flash Thompson Venom with them. Anyway, 55 tie-ins later, we resume with the next issue. I'll give the event this over Secret Invasion in terms of the writing. It doesn't feel padded. This has been a slow build to this moment, taking the time to try to get Tony's point across. An escalation of tension getting to the moment where the heroes are fighting each other. This is not like Secret Invasion, where it feels like fight scenes momentarily interrupted by, say, are you a Skrull? If this was a better written comic, this would be the moment with the biggest impact, the centerpiece of the story. The airport fight of the MCU Civil War, for instance. Really, the only thing that hurts the structure is that Tony himself has basically been at 100 this whole time. There's nowhere emotionally to go with him because he starts pissed off and he stays pissed off the entire time to the point of unreasonableness. The Inhumans get called in to help Carol Danvers' side and Medusa agrees to do so, hoping to calm things down. What are they fighting over? Dude. Have you not been paying attention? Or did you just forget about Tony Stark kidnapping you over this whole thing? So anyway, more fight scene. I know what this is, lady. You're trying to control that which can't be controlled, and you're losing your mind trying. You're projecting, Tony. Yeah, he is. I keep hearing reactions from people being like, man, this event ruined Carol Danvers for me. I can't stand Carol Danvers after this comic. But like, that must have happened in the tie-ins because in the main event itself, she's barely done anything. No, she is not guiltless, but in the actual event, Tony Stark has been the one ranting and raving and kidnapping and basically making a complete and total ass of himself at every opportunity. Are people just so checked out from Tony being terrible in event comics that they don't even blink when stuff like this happens? This is also an event that's really frustrating to me to critique because it's just the same point over and over again. Tony's position is idiotic, Carol is going too far in what she's doing, but the baseline of her position of utilizing Ulysses' visions is correct. Rinse and repeat!
Tony manages to knock Carol down. I cooked you a little something special. See? I prepared for the future without upsetting the natural order of things.
Natural order of things?
That's totally inapplicable to anything that's going on here. And it's dumb.
Ulysses watches this from afar and starts crying, but then something weird happens. Strands of light seem to come out of his fingers and then travel all the way over to where they're fighting and wrap around all the heroes. It shows them a vision of Miles Morales killing Steve Rogers. Now, if you were around for the last Event Comics month, you know the context for this. This is actually intended to be foreshadowing for Secret Empire. But for now, it's just a horrifying, bizarre image, and nobody realizes why any of this is happening. And unfortunately, we have Carol once again doing her thing, sadly telling Miles he's under arrest to end issue 5. The good news is that she sees reason as soon as Tony starts ranting at her again, saying he's not under arrest, she just wants him to come with them to help ensure that future doesn't come to pass. Miles, of course, is just cracking under this moment, and Steve Rogers steps up. And this is retroactively, again, why Secret Empire is so frustrating. Because this Steve Rogers, who I remind you is actually Stevel, the Hydra construct of Steve Rogers, who is actually an evil fascist planning on taking over America, is still acting completely like the real deal, saying that it's Miles' decision what to do now. Miles just wants to go home, and Steve says, okay, good, we'll figure it out later. Carol wants to go after him, but Miss Marvel stops her since he's her friend. These are good emotional character moments, and why this is still a more interesting read than Secret Invasion, even if it's so infuriatingly dumb. So anyway, let's ruin that by reminding everyone why we hate comics, Maria Hill.
Every one of you who came here today to do battle like this, on government soil, this was, by any definition of the word, an act of terrorism. You are all under arrest!
Fuck off!
T'Challa is the one who prevents the situation from getting any worse, switching sides over to Steve Rogers, and because he's grown uncomfortable with Carol's side anyway. Thus, if you attack T'Challa, you're attacking Wakanda, and, well, that would be bad. Doctor Strange teleports Tony's side away, the Inhumans deciding to clear off as well. They return to New Atalan to see Ulysses. Well, his powers have been evolving, something that Tony has pointed out, especially since that time he first shared the Hulk vision with everyone. So now he's got those light tendrils and his eyes are glowing and stuff. Tony's side returns to base. Welcome to one of Nick Fury's old secret underground barbershop bunkers. For the younger among us, a barbershop is kind of a salon. Does Brian Michael Bendis think that barbershops don't exist anymore? You were a rock star out there, facial hair bro. I still hate you. You're not the only one, Doc. Get in line. Miss Marvel and the other young heroes decide to make a discreet exit to go find Miles as Tony asks T'Challa if there were any visions that weren't accurate, which he confirms, but he also says that many of them were accurate. I cannot help but wonder, as the young Inhumans' predictive powers grow in strength, as it seems is the case, if the accuracy has not become less so. If his predictive powers are getting stronger, shouldn't that mean they're more accurate? Both Carol and Tony want to find Miles, they don't know his real name, just that he's Spider-Man, and bring him into their care for his protection, but he decides his best call was to go right to the scene of the future crime, ending up right on the front steps of the US Capitol building where he's supposed to kill Steve, in broad daylight. Except in the last shot, it was very plainly night when Maria Hill said they found him. And they're in New York.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
On to issue 7, Ulysses is in a trance with his latest vision, which brings him into the far alternate future story, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan is a terrible edgelord comic by Mark Miller where an elder Wolverine has to fight the Hulk's cannibal incest hillbilly children and other goofy perils of a world where everyone is dead or awful or evil, and for some reason Marvel wants to keep revisiting it. Anyway, in his vision, which he now seems to be fully transported into, Old Man Logan kills a Hulk hillbilly, Hulkabilly, and says that the Inhumans all left Earth long ago and that Tony Stark did something to cause the world to be like this, simply saying he pushed her too far. Back in the present, I guess it's illegal for superheroes to just be standing on the Capitol steps because cops are already there and aiming guns at Miles. Carol wants to get Miles into their custody to protect him, but they also don't want to try to force it. They want to convince him to come to them for help. Maria Hill gets the cops to stand down and leave as Steve Rogers shows up to talk to him. Ulysses' vision ends and he says they have to convince Carol Danvers to stop fighting Tony Stark or the world is doomed. Of all the reasons for the apocalypse, Captain Marvel and Iron Man being mad at each other over someone who can see a probable future is definitely one of the lamest ones. Steve and Miles talk for a bit, wanting to figure out what could possibly lead to the vision they saw, and Carol shows up too, mentioning how she had the cops called off. It would be so nice if you started to figure out that I have the best intentions for all of us. Cap, tell him I'm not Satan.
She's not Satan. As far as I know, she hasn't made any deals for anyone's marriages.
She agrees with Cap that this has all gone too far, but she can't just hope everything works out fine, and offers to take Miles someplace safe to ensure the vision doesn't come to pass. And then here comes Tony Stark to make things worse, encasing Miles in a force field while he flies down in a souped-up War Machine armor. They fight and she hits him hard in the final page of issue 7, bringing us to the end of this godforsaken event. Maria Hill orders the other superhero teams who want to join in the fight to stand down. The last thing they want is an even bigger brawl on the steps of the Capitol, when the Inhumans call up to say they have to stop the fight. Carol and Tony aren't listening to anyone tell them to knock this crap off. Hell, Tony even accidentally knocks Steve unconscious during this with his missiles, and blames that on Carol. Great job not killing Cap just then. You are a bad person, Tony! Ulysses is in another trance, and the Inhumans realize that they need to step in and stop this themselves, grabbing him and teleporting out to the Capitol steps. With the increasing escalation, Maria Hill finally gives permission for the other heroes to go in, but it doesn't really matter. In the chaos of the fight, Carol finally blasts the armor hard enough to disintegrate it. Ulysses then zaps everyone with future vision, showing them several future event comics like Monsters Unleashed, Secret Empire, what I presume to be X-Men versus Inhumans, some story where Inhumans fight War of the World style tripods, what I presume to be War of the Realms, and 2 that I don't recognize involving impaled people, a destroyed Sentinel, and Ultron standing over a bunch of dead heroes. Probably that thing that happened with Ultron fusing with Hank Pym that we saw in Secret Empire. And finally, Eternity, the manifestation of the universe, tells Ulysses that he's shown the Earth all it can now, and it's time for him to join other cosmic beings, which Ulysses seems all in favor of. So basically what this ending boils down to is...
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
So yeah, just like Secret Invasion, this event basically ended because the creators got bored and wanted to start working on the next thing. Tony Stark is in a coma, having done something to himself as he's evidently been experimenting on himself for years, which frankly means him being disappointed that Bruce Banner was also experimenting on himself for the past year makes Tony more than a little hypocritical, but that's par for the course so far.
He wasn't fighting you, you know.
What?
He trusted you.
Stop it.
I'm serious.
No, Beast, he was literally fighting her. He kept escalating the conflict and shooting at her while she was trying to de-escalate. Beast claims that it was more about making sure the next person in charge didn't misuse the visions, but that is horse crap. If Ulysses hadn't evolved into a higher state of being, he could have just not told the next person what the visions were and restricted access to the information to only those whom he wanted to. And what happens when Ulysses eventually died of old age or illness or any number of other things that kill millions of people all the time in the Marvel Universe? And if that was really Tony's motivation, why didn't he say that instead of stopping horrible disasters interferes with the natural order of things? After Hawkeye stops by to, I don't know, do something, he just tells Carol, trust me. Carol goes to meet with the president. In the 0th issue, Rhodey had met with the president because he wanted him to become his new Secretary of Defense. The first step for Rhodey eventually becoming president as well. And now the president wants to do the same thing for her. Not make her Secretary of Defense, but hand her a blank check on whatever she wants to do next. And so our comic ends with her saying she has some ideas about the future. And that's it. That's this event. Tony Stark is knocked out and apparently revealed years down the line that he actually died here or something. I don't care. It's clearly a retcon. And Carol gets to do whatever the hell she wants.
The whole situation with Ulysses ended up being nothing more than a hiccup on the grand scheme of things, other than making the two heroes behind this civil war look like jackasses.
We hope you've enjoyed No Moral Theater, ladies and gentlemen.
This comic sucks, as I think I have illustrated throughout this review. And what's fascinating is that, like I said before, this did so much damage to Carol Danvers' reputation among fans that many still refuse to buy more books with her in it. But like, that's barely a thing in the event miniseries itself. And I know crap was happening in the tie-ins. It was definitely occurring over in the pages of Miss Marvel, but it makes me wonder how much of that was the event's fault versus how much of that was overzealous other writers taking things too far. The visions we see from Ulysses in this story seem to always be about massive catastrophes, but the way it's described as occurring is that Carol is arresting people for future overdue library books or something. As for the positives of this event, it's paced well and it has good character moments for people who aren't Tony Stark. It's definitely the least quippy of the Bendis events I've reviewed, and while the conflict is stupid, it's taken seriously and not just intended for cool wham moments like Secret Invasion had. No one wants to fight, but they're driven to the positions they think they need to be in. The artwork is good and serviceable, and the final fight between Iron Man and Captain Marvel is pretty decent. I honestly feel this is better than the original Civil War, but it certainly is infuriating. And it just goes down as yet another craptastic heroes fighting heroes instead of bad guys fight that has repeatedly seeped into Marvel since the original Civil War. And while Civil War is terrible, you can give Marvel credit for at least sticking to their guns on the Superhero Registration Act and its status quo for several years afterwards. Civil War II? A cynical cash grab to try to tie into a much better story that I am happy to revisit time and again. Whereas with Civil War II, I am never gonna revisit this unless I have to for this job, and certainly not one of its 140 plus tie-ins. Next time, we end Event Comics Month 4 by heading back over to DC and an event that itself got a sequel and set the stage for a lot of more recent DC stuff, Dark Knight's Metal.
You want to do your job as best as you can? Well, my piggy bank is open, and I want you to go forward and win. Big. Don't blow this off. What can I do for you? For instance, I have an extensive collection of Avengers pictures behind me for no reason. Want one of those?
Hello my friends, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!